Kay Williams. My questions have to do with your thoughts on the independent Scientology movement. You probably need to know most of my knowledge of this comes from YouTube videos and a few books on the subject, not exactly representative, but all I have available. In many of them, the independent Scientologists seem to be saying that Hubbard's Scientology is valid and that Miscavige has perverted it. Does this mean that they still believe in fair game, no psychologists, disconnecting, SPs, policies on homosexuality, mind control, etc.? Someone said this was just an evolutionary process and that in the future they will change. Has that happened? Why does no one confront them about these questions? Again, I didn't want to betray my ignorance because I can hardly get a good picture from my limited media. Is there any worry that some of the people who enjoyed power might want to recreate it in independent Scientology? Okay, sorry that was an earful. I don't want to sound judgmental about people I don't know, but this kind of thing has historically been frequent. Thanks for your time. The number of people who practice independent Scientology at this point, as far as I can tell, numbers in the hundreds, not even thousands. And of course, some of them might argue with me about that, but from what I've seen of gatherings and conventions and what I see representative independent Scientology groups on the internet, that's what I'm thinking. So we're talking about a very small number of people. Scientology itself is already a very small number of people compared to any other really relevant group or organization in the world. But it just gets all this attention because of its controversial nature and because of the fact that Tom Cruise, John Travolta, etc. are Scientologists. So as far as independent Scientologists go, there's lots of different groups. These groups are small, right? And they deliver Dianetics for Scientology courses in some places. They deliver the counseling services in some places. And, some of these independent Scientologists is just one guy, out of his home. Other ones organize, get into groups, deliver courses and this sort of thing. And I think there's a whole independent Scientology mission that used to be an official Scientology mission in Israel. And apparently they, promote that they're doing wonderfully. And I don't know, maybe they are. Independent Scientology to me is kind of a waste of time, and I don't support it or really try to push people in that direction unless absolutely necessary. Mainly because, as I've said about my opinions and attitudes about Scientology, is that it's mainly a destructive system. It's meant to be an authoritarian control system. That's when you look at the structure and framework of organized Scientology or the Church of Scientology. That's what it is. You have the ethics trappings and framework. You have the Office of Special Affairs, which is its whole legal division and investigative division and this sort of thing. You have the entirety of the Sea organization. So independent Scientology often does away with these things or does away with them to one degree or another, right? Because they don't have or even particularly like the Sea organization. They think, I think, in general, they think Hubbard kind of went off the rails at some point in regards to that. They have disagreements. So what you have is, it's hard to talk about it in general terms because all these individual independent Scientology groups cherry pick their own version of what they think the dogma and practice of Scientology should be. So some will hold on to the SP, suppressive person technology and the ethics technology, and they'll use that and they'll push that, or they'll only push part of it, right? And they might not push the suppressive person part, but they might push the other parts of the ethics, the overt and withhold write-ups where you write down all the things you've done that are bad, or the security checking, or what's called the conditions formulas, which are supposed to be steps you can follow in order to improve your life, right? Very questionable that any of that stuff actually, has uniform workability, but they think it does, or they apply it in such a way that it does for them, and so, fine. You are right that a common point of agreement between many independent Scientologists is that L. Ron Hubbard was right. L. Ron Hubbard nailed it. He figured out amazing, genius, incredible things. and discoveries, and despite maybe his personal shortcomings, they still believe that the work that he created is still of value, whether even though they might acknowledge that he was a pathological liar himself, or that there were things that were wrong with him personally, right, or that he had his own personal shortcomings. But they also believe that David Miscavige is definitely perverted and ruined organized Scientology and has corrupted L. Ron Hubbard's basic intentions and objectives. So that's a common point of agreement, and that point of realizing that Miscavige is really screwing things up, and that Scientology is really not, that organized Scientology is not what it should be, and leaving organized Scientology behind. I mean, that's a good thing. And it does tend to be a step in an evolutionary process of recovery from Scientology overall. And I do know people who were involved in independent Scientology or practicing independent Scientology, or going out and getting auditing, from independent Scientologists, and then came to the realization that, yeah, no, it's actually bullshit, and no, I don't need to be doing any part of this, and they flush it out of their life entirely. I didn't happen to hit that step. I skipped that and went right to, get it out of my life. And a lot of people do, right? You don't have to go through this as a way station on the road to recovery, but many do, and to one form or degree or another. So that's the overview of the practice of it. Is it's really cherry picked between various groups. So you'll have a lot of variation in there. As far as somebody taking over, using independent Scientology to sort of take over or gather power or something like that, which was part of your question, there's been talk or fear of something like that, or people maybe, there was a lot of talk when Marty Rathbun first came out and was doing independent Scientology work, that he was trying to, create his own Church of Scientology or something in the field, right under him being the leader. And there were various good reasons to think that might have been true at the time, in terms of some of the things he was saying and the way he was acting and whatnot. But he's changed, and he's definitely not doing anything like that. And I don't know that he ever really wanted to. I mean, there were just indicators that maybe that was the direction he was going in, but then it became clear that wasn't what he was doing. And I haven't particularly heard or seen anybody else doing that. One thing that I will comment on about that is that when people leave Scientology and leave that authoritarian system behind, they do tend to have fairly immediately a recognition that they were under a totalitarian, authoritarian type system, that Scientology is a very high control group, and they don't want to be part of something like that again, and they're very gun shy of going anywhere near somebody who might be proposing, or looking like they're trying to run such a system on them, right? So that's a lesson I think a lot of people coming out of Scientology have learned, and so they tend to be, watchful for that kind of nonsense going on. So I haven't particularly seen anything like that, and I think those are all the points of your question. So there you go.